Hello and welcome back to Joe Bailey Revision. Today we will be looking at the secondary topic we've done so far, the first being good and evil. You can go back and check that if you want, but today we're looking at origins and meanings. So let's begin. So let's start where I did. So origins and meanings. Creation. So the first thing we need to know about creation is the idea of creatio ex nihilo. Creatio ex nihilo. So basically what it means is creation from nothing. So it's the belief that God created everything from nothing. So this has been used in St. Augustine's Confession 7 to show that God is eternal, meaning he's alive from the start to the end, that God is transcendent because he completed the impossible, and God is omnibenevolent because he created things to be good. So if he created everything out of nothing, he must be all of these things, which are all pretty good things for God to be. So also I've linked this to a quote here from the Catechism of the Catholic Church 295, which is, he wanted others to have his goodness and wisdom, which shows his omnibenevolence. So let's look more about ideas of creatio ex nihilo. So a guy called Paley used the idea of a watch to show that something that's complex must have been designed, it must have a designer. So he used this to try and show that he thought that the earth must have been designed by God because of how complex it is. And another person, Chesterton, showed that the world has rules and patterns with plans and intentions, such as things like DNA and photosynthesis, so they must have been made by God. And this again links to a part of the CCC 283 about science helping us appreciate God more. The idea that God created science for us to explore, I suppose. So creation. Let's look at another part of creation. Let's look at the Big Bang Theory. Bazinga. Let's look at it. Okay, so Big Bang Theory, what is it? So it's the idea of a moment of singularity. It's basically a quick expansion of space, time, energy, and matter that caused everything to exist at the start of time. So people argue over some things about it, though, like how it was created. Like some people, like Catholics, like Lemaitre, who was a scientist, said, and a Catholic, said that God must have created this Big Bang. However, other people, such as atheists, like Stephen Hawking, say that gravity must have caused it because they don't believe in the existence of a God, meaning they will have to have another reason for it. And people say it's unreliable to say it's gravity because if there was nothing, then nothing could have existed except for something that was transcendent, such as God. So that's an important thing to remember. So the Big Bang Theory is based on evidence that the universe is still expanding. We can tell this because some light will only just arrive now from the beginning of time because it is millions of light years away, meaning the light will take that long to travel. That was a bit of science for you. So now let's have a look at Genesis. So Genesis is the biblical creation story, and it basically takes place over 7 days, 6 days creating and the last day where God rested. So two different people have different views on Genesis, the Catholics and the fundamentalists. So first let's look at fundamentalists, because this is a bit more simple. So they believe that the creation story is literally true. They believe there was no Big Bang, there couldn't have been, because God actually created the world in 7 days. It didn't happen in one big explosion. And because of this, they rest on the Sabbath, the seventh day, like God did, because they believe they should act like was literally acted here. However, the Catholics believe that the creation story is not literally true. It's only symbolically true. So because of this, they believe that the Big Bang and the creation story, so be it, can coexist. You can follow the ideals of the creation story, but also believe in the Big Bang. So yeah, it's symbolically true because it shows God's love and power towards us. So it shows us what we owe him. Also, it shows us about the idea of imago Dei, which is basically we're all made in God's image as humans, showing our importance and how sacred we are, a very important thing that we'll look on later. Also, another symbolizing thing there is stewardship. So it tells us all about stewardship, how humans have to look after and have dominion over plants and animals, and it's our responsibility to look after the land, which may be one way a Catholic goes about showing their beliefs, by looking after plants and animals, because that's what we were told to do. The next thing we're going to look at is a bit more science for you, the theory of evolution. So basically, the theory of evolution is the idea that animals and plants evolve to adapt, and they've done this over time, like thousands and millions of years. So it was found by Charles Darwin, obviously, and it's evident, and it shows that all things are related, and they use evidence for it, such as fossils and DNA, which is pretty solid evidence. However, creationists, not Catholics agree with it because Pope John Paul II said that they could, and it's more than a hypothesis, I believe he said. But creationists disagree because they say it's against God, because God created all things in Genesis. This must have happened. So by saying it didn't, you're going against him by saying that things actually changed when they believe they didn't. Humans existed in the beginning, like they were created, like Adam and Eve. So yeah, they believe that fossils and DNA are fake. They're making things up to try and prove it. They disagree because they disagree with the fact that all living things are related, because they think humans are somehow different from animals because of how they're made in God's image and how they should have extra power over animals and that sort of thing. So yeah, let's go to the next one. And now we'll learn about arguably the most important thing in Christianity, the Bible, which is the Christian holy book. It's the book. It's basically not just one book. It's like a library. It's full of loads of different stories, and we'll go through them in a minute. So the stories were collected together by Pope Damascus a lot later on than they happened, obviously. So let's start with the Old Testament, which is all about God. So the first part of the Old Testament is Pentateuch, which is about the laws of God. I might have said that wrong. The second part is history. It's about God guiding people in the past. So God showing people what to do. And yeah, helping them. And then the next bit's about wisdom. So it's about prayers, psalms, and advice. It's called wisdom. It basically, you can look back on it to give you like ideas of what you should do and how to act good. Although there's something similar to that later, but we'll get onto that soon. And there's also prophets, which is the book's all about holy people that teach us important lessons about life and how we should live it. And kind of similar to the advice part of wisdom, but it's actually holy people individually instead of just setting out what's meant by the rules. So next, the New Testament. So it starts off with the Gospels, which they basically tell us about the life of Jesus through what many people know about it. So through the Matthew's opinion, through Mark's opinion, through Luke's opinion, through John's opinion. That's why there's 4 different ways of it. They all contain different things about Jesus' life and the great things he's done. So the next part is the Acts of the Apostles, which basically tells about the early church and how it was formed. And yeah, how they set it up, how they managed it, and that sort of thing, which is kind of interesting. The next is the epistles, which are like, I think it basically means letters, and it's how to live by Jesus' teaching. So it's basically the same as wisdom, which is advice. However, it's through Jesus' teachings. So it's kind of the updated version which only Christians follow of, which came into being the Bible. So the next thing is the book of Revelation, which basically talks about the end of the world and how God will end the world. There has been a beginning, so there must be an end and all that sort of stuff. So let's move on again. So now let's talk about the sanctity of life, which is a pretty big belief for Catholics. So sanctity of life is basically because they believe that human life is a gift from God, so only He should be able to take it away. Another thing that evidences this is one of the 10 Commandments, which says, "Do not commit murder." Another thing to note is the idea of Imago Dei again. God created human beings to be like Himself. It's a quote from Genesis 1:27, which you can use to evidence Imago Dei even further if you're using it in something. So, an important Catholic person was Saint Catherine of Siena. Basically, she said things about like when we look in a mirror and see a part of God in ourselves. So there is a part of God in all of us, so we are all sacred, and we all reflect His dignity. This can be seen through the conscience, which tells us about our mistakes and sins we made. So it's the idea that we are all sacred and know right from wrong. And we all know sort of how to avoid sin and how to get better from it, making us closer to God. And we don't really agree with killing something that is a part of God. God made you for a reason, basically. So let's move on. So the sanctity of life is often used against abortion. So abortion is the thing where you kill kids before they're born. Basically, abortion. Catholics disagree to abortion because, well, of the sanctity of life that we've just talked about, and because of the Catechism of the Catholic Church 2270, which tells us that human life must be respected and protected absolutely from conception, which means from conception, human life has to be allowed to live. So from conception, it is considered a human, the baby is. So Catholics also disagree because of something said in Psalm 139. You saw me before I was born. It's basically the idea that God knew us before birth and had a plan for us from then. So life is sacred even before birth, so we shouldn't get rid of it. He has a plan for us from the beginning, so we shouldn't go against his plan. Some people who agree with abortion, though, most of the time, are humanists. And this is because they believe that living humans should take priority over people who aren't yet alive. They also think that the quality of someone's life is highly important. So if the child would end up having a bad quality of life, or the person having to look after them would, because of it, then that would not be worth it. Also, they agree with it because they believe sometimes it minimises suffering. So if the parent is going to have to go through a lot of suffering, or the child throughout their life is going to have to go through a lot of suffering because of the circumstances they're in, it should happen. So they also think it's good that it allows choice, and sometimes if people don't want children, they should just have an abortion because it will make them feel better. So yeah, these views basically completely contradict each other, which is why they make a perfect long answer question. So you gotta look a lot into these reasons and the ideas behind them. So the next thing we're going to look at is paintings and symbolism. So first let's look at a very important painting, a very popular painting, Michelangelo's Creation of Adam. And basically this tells us a lot about God and Adam. So let's start off with God. So it shows that God is immanent because he personally created Adam. You actually see in the picture his hand touching Adam, like he has created that, showing that he is connected to humanity. Also, it shows that God is omnibenevolent as he's reaching out to Adam and flying towards him, so he's trying to help him. Also, the idea that he's pointing could show that he's proud of his creation. He thinks humanity was, in the whole, through his creation, a triumph. So also it shows us that God is eternal because of his old-looking facial features. So in the picture he has white hair and things that would make you think he's an old man, showing that he's lived a long time, even though at this time of Genesis it is the beginning of time. So he's been there, well, forever, I suppose. So he's eternal. Also, the features looking like an old man could show his wisdom because he's also believed to be omniscient, which basically means all-knowing, as omnibenevolent is all-loving. So, transcendent. God is also shown to be transcendent as he is arriving through a portal, as if he's from some other frame of existence or something. He is above what we can understand, if I can say that. Omnipotent. God is omnipotent. So, because we see him flying, that is not something we normally associate a humanoid being able to do without wings. It's magical and powerful. Also, he's higher than Adam, showing that he's higher in power. It's representative of his position, I suppose. So next, let's look at Adam. So Adam's lazy arm gesture, the fact that his arms just kind of flailing about, could show that could represent that humanity begins straying from God by potentially not accepting him, or by creating sin. As we know, the story about Adam and Eve and the tree of knowledge going against God, original sin was created. Also, Adam looks quite a bit like God in the picture, representing Imago Dei again, because God created humans and they look like him, and Adam looks quite a lot like God in the picture, almost like they're related, which sort of in a way makes sense. And our final painting is the Tree of Life mosaic, and it shows us a lot of things. So first, there's the cross and tree, which the cross shows us about Jesus' death. And basically the idea of a tree coming out from the cross shows us that it grew into humanity's salvation. And this links to the tree of knowledge in Eden from the beginning of the Bible, where Adam and Eve pick the fruit and go against God. It's almost like Jesus is somehow repairing that. He is giving humans back a way to connect with God and a way to salvation. And if we look here, the chi rho is a symbol used at the top of the mosaic. It's like a P and an X, and it's the Greek symbol for Jesus Christ. So what's next? The doves represent peace. They also represent the apostles, the followers of Jesus whilst he was alive. And they also show Pentecost, because on Pentecost there was all the fire, and it's basically similar to Holy Communion, like there was fire and they all gained new knowledge about God. And also, a dove is a symbol of that, as well as the fire. A dove is a symbol of the Holy Spirit, which came down to them at the time, I guess you'd say. Another thing is Alpha and Omega, which show the start and the end, which is a very important thing to think about in origins and meanings, really. The start, when the world was created, is held a great significance, and when the world would end also seems to be a very important topic to people. So that was origins and meanings. We did good. Thanks for 60 subscribers. I should have more videos soon. Goodbye.